Louisiana's future. Higher education has been and will continue to be my #1 priority. I will make it the top priority. We will fund higher education with the general fund dollars that are available because it's the most important thing. We have not budgeted by way of prioritization in the past 8 years. If it's the most important thing facing Louisiana's future, let's fund it first and then get to everything else. I understand the constitutional dedications that put higher education and to a lesser extent now health care at risk, but if it's truly a priority, a governor is going to say with whatever dollars we have, we're going to make sure we don't have higher education facing an 82% budget cut that would devastate every university in this state and the state of Louisiana as well.
Simply put, you fund higher education first, not as an afterthought with money that's left over after you've done everything else. That's what we've been doing in Louisiana under Bobby Jindal, and we see what it's gotten us. No state in the nation has cut higher education support more than Louisiana, more than $700 million this year alone. No state in the nation has raised tuition more at the same time period. That is the perfect recipe for disaster. We're sitting here in Baton Rouge, and LSU this year prepared paperwork to declare financial exigency, the equivalency of bankruptcy. That is not in our best interest. That paints a picture of a very bleak future in Louisiana unless we do something radically different. And I refuse to accept that current funding for higher education is the new normal. We've got to do better, otherwise our children will never have the future that they deserve. Our children and grandchildren ought to be able to live right here in Louisiana, go to community technical colleges, go to four-year universities, and get the best education available in the United States. And that's what I'll be working on every day as your next governor.
Thank you. Now we'll open it up for questions.
I have a follow-up on that. There seems to be a consensus among many of the things that you gentlemen have said that you're not going to waste your political capital on what Governor Foster and others wanted to do, which was consolidate higher education boards. But would you support, as Senator Vitter has said you would, a substantial strengthening of the Board of Regents to give it more control over what is today a fractured system?
We can start over here just to change it up.
I would support the concept until I see the language and the exact proposal. I can't tell you, and of course that's going to require a constitutional change as well, and so it will require a 2/3 vote in both houses of the legislature and approval by the people. But I will tell you, there is no when it comes to higher education governance, there is no best practice nationwide. Multiple states do it differently. Some do it well, some do not, and you cannot correlate those that do it well with a single type of governance structure. But if we try to attack the governance and make changes in governance, and it distracts us from actually improving the funding that we give to higher education, then it is a distraction. And I don't want to rearrange the deck chairs on the Titanic. I'd rather fix the problem, and the governance structure is not problem number one.
Well, you're right. I'm not interested in the governance structure either. When I was in the state Senate, though, I passed legislation that strengthened the Board of Regents. It's in place now, and in my discussions with the Board of Regents, I've said to them, tell me what else we need to do to give you the authority or the power that you need to be the overseer of every delivery system of higher education in Louisiana. And I don't think it's so much the law as it is the practice. I want people on management boards of institutions who are going to be advocates for higher education and tell me if I'm wrong about where we're going in higher education, not sit silently while higher education is decimated. I think the key is going to be to say to the Board of Regents, you need to allocate dollars based upon what the priorities are in Louisiana and make certain that every one of our institutions is adequately funded, but does so based upon what delivery system they're going to provide to get people ready for jobs in Louisiana. That applies to the community and technical colleges. It also applies to the four-year degree schools. And I think the problem right now is there are a lot of people doing end runs around the Board of Regents and running to the legislature and getting particular things rather than following a directive that the Board of Regents sets to make certain that we're funding higher education in a manner that's most appropriate.
I would agree. I have looked at management models across the nation, and I see no best management practice that we would import from another state and say this is the way to do it, it is the only way to do it. So I don't think we need to have another big battle on how many systems we have, how many management boards we have. I think we had those battles. It's time for us to move forward in light of the fact that there is no best management practice out there. clearly, I believe that we do need to strengthen, and I've said it before, a Board of Regents. I think the Board of Regents needs to have more authority. I think some of that authority needs to be constitutional. I would appoint very strong Board of Regents and ask them to lead, require that they lead, demand that they lead. And I think that one of the things that you look at is in our 14 four-year universities, not every university can be everything to everybody, but they all can be centers of excellence. I really believe they can all be economic engines in the area, and I think working with a strong Board of Regents, we can make that happen.
Next question.
There are new reports out that show that Louisiana has great poverty. All of you have been asked in the past about whether you support raising the minimum wage. My question is two parts. Have you ever waited tables, and do you support raising the minimum wage, in particular for our restaurant workers, our wait staff, which make less than 30% of the federal minimum wage? They make $2.13 an hour.
The question is, would we support, don't count this on my time, because I was asked to repeat the question. Would you support raising the minimum wage, particularly for restaurant workers and waiters who are struggling? I'm paraphrasing. And have you ever waited tables? I'll answer the second part first. No, I have not waited tables professionally. I have waited tables in various functions and various events, but I never worked as a waiter during my earlier years. No, I would not support raising the minimum wage. It's proven to be in various areas counterproductive, particularly in resulting in less jobs, less opportunities for young people, less new jobs for teenagers who are going to get their first job that may be. I don't think that's the answer. The answer to poverty, and it is a key question, I have been talking about it, is education. The most important thing we can do in this state to move people off of poverty is to improve our educational system, and most of all, provide hope for people who are caught up in a cycle of poverty their entire lives. All they've ever seen is poverty, poverty, poverty. We've got to stop that. The way we stop that is investing in education and creating a mindset in government that's going to create jobs. Government's not the job creator. Government creates the environment where jobs are created. And when that happens, that's going to help everyone. And that, not raising the minimum wage, I think, is the key to the future, moving people off of poverty and preserving a great business climate for this state.
So I never professionally waited on tables, but as the seventh child of 9 kids, I waited on 5 sisters a whole lot. I'll surely tell you that. And with 5 children, I know what it means. I have daughters who've waited on tables and scratched and clawed their way through college educations. I do not believe raising the minimum wage is the answer. I believe raising minimum expectations is really more what we ought to look at. And the way we do that is investing in an early childhood initiative. All one has to do is look at West Feliciana Parish, a parish adjacent to here that has its own set of challenging demographics. And they made a radical move and took Head Start into the public school system, invested all in with their local money, with their local tax money on an early childhood initiative. And we saw West Feliciana Parish go from one of the poorer third grade readers in the state to some of the highest third grade readers in the state. That didn't happen because of good luck. That happened because of good management. I think the way we improve the wages in this state is to start with early childhood education and invest in a community and technical college program.
Because I know that many minimum wage workers are not entry-level workers in high school or in college, but in fact, many of them are single mothers with children, working for $7.25 an hour, the same it's been since 2009. I absolutely support increasing the minimum wage. I call upon Congress to do it, and if they don't want to do it, we should do it in the state, just like 30 states now have a higher minimum wage than the national uniform rate. It is clearly important with respect to poverty, and the only problem about saying that it reduces the number of jobs available is that that statement just simply isn't true. That has never been the experience with an increase in the minimum wage. And by the way, it's only part of the program to reduce poverty in Louisiana. The other part is we're going to end the gender pay gap that exists in Louisiana. We're going to double the earned income tax credit. And finally, we're going to expand the Medicaid program. All the right things to do, all of which help people in poverty.
When elected, will you support Internet Louisiana sales tax?
So what I support is the Marketplace Fairness Act, and I call on Congress to pass that act. It's very, I think, important to understand that here recently some ads that are going around talking about the internet tax. I'd ask all the members of the press to specifically pay attention to what happened on May the 17th, 1994 through House Bill number 21, a bill to impose a 8% catalog telecommunications tax in Louisiana, a tax that was paid for, voted for by Senator Vitter. There was a question in the legislative record that was asked to the chairman by Representative Pepe Bruno. Will this require a 2/3 vote inasmuch it is a new tax? The chair responds, it will require a 2/3 vote because it is a new tax. Senator Vitter, one of the 75 people in the legislature that voted for it. I call on him to pass the Marketplace Fairness Act in Congress so that we can level the playing field from Main Street to Wall Street with regards to internet tax in Louisiana.
There certainly will not be an internet tax imposed by the state of Louisiana. Let me make that very clear. This is a national issue. Congress has before it legislation that would create a mechanism to make certain that sales made over the internet are taxed. In Louisiana, as all of you know, we already tax it. There's a use tax, and you're supposed to pay use tax for everything you buy over the internet. It's hardly ever done. But we need to have Congress pass that act. It's a danger to Main Street and to Louisiana businesses not to be able to, or to be able to maintain competition with internet purchases. So it's absolutely essential that that Marketplace Fairness Act pass. I think it will eventually pass through Congress. We'll have to set up a mechanism in Louisiana to be able to comport with the federal requirements on collecting that sales tax. That'll take some effort and some leadership on the part of a governor who's going to bring everybody together and say we've got to have a point of collection for sales taxes made over the internet consistent with what's called SUSA, this national act. So we've got to make sure we do that. But to make sure it's clear, there's not going to be an internet tax, a tax on using the internet in Louisiana. We're talking about a tax on purchases that are made over the internet.
The tax in question is a tax that's already owed. It's not a new tax. Obviously, we're not collecting it, and so we need a new collection mechanism. I do support it. In fact, this year I voted for legislation that would allow the state of Louisiana to do presently the maximum under the law to enforce this tax and have these out-of-state catalog and internet sales companies collect and remit sales tax to Louisiana. It's the right thing to do. Congress should pass the Marketplace Fairness Act. But until they do that, Louisiana should act to the maximum extent that it can as well. Unfortunately, while that act passed, the governor vetoed it. But this is about fairness. We shouldn't put Louisiana bricks and mortar retailers at a competitive disadvantage of 9 and 10% to out-of-state catalog and internet sales. That just doesn't make sense for us. It's not fair, and we have to do better. And by the way, the estimates on the amount of revenue that would be generated vary greatly, from less than $100 million a year to up to $800 million a year, but half of it would go to the state government and half would go to local. Whatever that revenue total is, we ought to get it and split it up the way it's supposed to be.
I'll try to make one that's a lot simpler that I think everyone will understand. I'd like to know your position. Do you believe a person has the constitutional right to have a trial by jury for civil matters for amounts less than $50,000? If you do support it, would you be inclined to revive efforts to fail this last legislative session to have that threshold lowered? If you do not support it, would you please explain why you would defend the $50,000 threshold for such trials by jury? Thank you.
Yeah, the question is, would we support lowering the jury trial threshold for civil matters, which is now at $50,000? Virtually every year I was in the Senate, and I can't say every year, but virtually every year I filed a bill to do just that. I'm in favor of that. I'm in favor of reducing it to $25,000. That's the threshold that I believe is appropriate. I believe if it's any lower than that, it's going to create problems in judicial systems, particularly in a number of the rural judicial systems where judges are in civil court and criminal court at the same time. Baton Rouge, we have them separated. But I do think people have a right to trial by jury, and I think the threshold has been too high. I think it's resulted in some cases that really aren't valued as much as they should be, becoming a lot more valuable. So I support that effort. I've told trial lawyers who don't want to see it lowered that I would support lowering it to 25, but I don't believe it ought to go any lower than that.
Thank you for the question. I don't believe there's a constitutional right to a $0 jury trial threshold. Otherwise, we would have constitutional tax on the current system.
If you feel there should be.
No, I don't. And I think the system we have now is fair. I think it's reasonable and strikes